Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. We'll come back to that one in a moment. But think about that. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Be careful or give careful attention to your herds. Why is listening important? Well, it's a part of the development of a leader. For leadership, we need a community. Communities produce leaders. Leaders then serve the community and continue to produce new leaders. And something to point out here, I don't think I did the other day, but one thing a leader does is creates possibilities for people. Some people think being a leader means you control what other people do. And in some situations, you may have to do that. If you are a military leader and you are charging the hill, you may have to control what they do to a certain extent. But even in those such situations, and I've never been in battle, but having read comments from military leaders, even in those situations, you still allow a certain amount of decision making for the people there in the front. Because they're right there, they may have to make another decision to be most effective. But ideally what leaders do is not control what other people do, but allow them to grow to where they actually maybe grow beyond you. And it's not a testament against you if the people you're leading, eventually some of them grow beyond you and become an even better leader. It is a testament and a compliment to your style of leadership that you have given them room to grow, right? That's very, very important. And what hurts the church is when there are leaders who are more concerned about their position. In fact, the other day, I thought I already did this here, and then I mentioned it to somebody and I hadn't. I did this last week, but talked about things that will destroy unity in a church. These are also things that will scuttle an effective leadership, but selfishness. When we are selfish, practice selfishness, we're looking at what's in this for me, right? Envy. Envy is when I have negative feelings toward you for the accomplishments you have. It may be that you have got a good family, that you have a better job and you make more money, that you have a higher position at the office, that other people like you. What's one of the biggest motivating factors or reasons for keying someone's car? They've got a nicer car than you. And you've either got to work hard, excuse me, you've either got to work harder and save your money to get a car like that, or you just key their car and now their car isn't as good. That's why James says, or God says through James, where you find what? Envy and selfish ambition, there you find every kind of evil practice and disorder. James 3. These two things are horribly, horribly wicked. And every sin you can think of is because of these two things right here. Everything from stealing a piece of bubble gum to stealing somebody's kid. One's relatively minor, one's one of the most horrible things you can think of. But they all stem from the same base attitude. What I want and my hatred for you. And if these two things are big enough, there's no level of evil that they're not capable of committing. But then you've got control. And sometimes that comes out because of a spirit of competition, even in a church. This will destroy unity in a church, in a family, on a community baseball board. I've seen it happen there, anywhere you go. And, you know, I'm always looking for mnemonic devices. Mnemonic, things to help you remember. And I don't know why this works out this way, but SEC. And I don't know if there's any SEC football fans here. I saw your son-in-law with Alabama clothes on today, and I said, "What are you doing with those?" He said, "My father-in-law gave them to me." I said, "Oh, I don't know if I can use this illustration." And then the Atlantic Coast Conference and all the other fans said, "You have to use that illustration." So there it is. But selfishness, envy, and control or competition, those are They don't have room in the place of a truly spiritual and gifted leader. Because all these things will make you work to keep yourself on top and not allow the others to grow. Thomas Jefferson, one of the reasons I think he was a great leader, excuse me, and I know there's a lot of criticisms about him, but one of the things he did was he worked to create a situation in America where what he called the natural aristocracy would have a chance to grow. It would not be that there was an aristocracy based on money. There would not be an aristocracy. You getting that water for me? Bless you. The coffee was good, but it doesn't help the throat. Thanks. You can look away if you want for a second. That helps better, thank you. He didn't want position where you become president, now your son will be president, and your grandson will be president, and your great-grandson. He didn't want that either. He wanted a public education system that would teach boys and girls so that with their education and with their opportunity to work, the best and the brightest every generation would rise to the top. And we would ideally have the best leaders every generation. Sadly, it didn't take too long for that plan of his to be scuttled. By the 1820s, he complained to one of the other presidents, probably James Madison, I'm not sure who, but he complained that our experiment has failed. The corporations have taken over. And what the corporations would do is they would divert money to their favorite people who would be put into office that would funnel jobs and money and power to them. And they would use their position to develop an aristocracy based on their influence to promote their interests, not a natural aristocracy where every boy and girl has an opportunity through education and hard work to rise to the top and provide the best possible leadership for the country. Can you imagine he was complaining about that in the 1820s? What would he say if he were here today? He'd probably say, put me back in the grave. I don't know, but I'm just imagining. Well, see, in our churches, what we want is leaders who will allow, through Bible school programs, through mentoring, through whatever methods we have in our churches, of allowing gifted young men and women who devote themselves to Scripture and prayer and concern for their brothers and sisters to rise to the top and give leadership to the people in the body. Not keep them down. If there's a benevolent drive, if there is an attendance drive, whatever it is, you don't want a leader that's going to say, oh man, don't we have enough kids here now? Man, don't we have enough kids for VBS? We can't get them all to heaven. We'll get the ones we can and let God worry about the rest. No. Have you ever heard anybody do something like that though? No, that is not the kind of leader you want. Okay, you may have more children than you can fit in your classrooms right now. Do you think that is a problem for God? God is going to find some way through leaders who believe in Him to take care of those kids. It's not up to us to decide how many kids God wants in this building. Okay, we got 45. That's a pretty comfortable number. We don't need any more. Heaven knows what we're going to do if their parents start coming too. We just don't have room for them. We've got to cut it off right here. No more inviting kids to VBS. We've got enough. Just even thinking about that, but I see that stuff happening. And we have to have leaders that promote growth. So, selfishness, envy, control, they work against everything that the Spirit is wanting to do in your church, in your congregation. So, listening is very important. Number one, for character development, but number two, to gauge the spiritual development of our people in the church. As leaders, we have to be concerned about the souls of our members. Listening helps us know what's going on to them. Leaders of Israel, this is in the Old Testament, needed to listen to people, the people of their communities, their home, their neighborhood, their nation, to gauge their spiritual health. Listening was a sign of a wise shepherd. I've already read Proverbs 27:23. Let's read it again. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. When the hay is removed and new growth appears, and the grass from the hills is gathered in, the lambs will provide you with clothing, and the goats with the price of a field. You will have plenty of goat's milk to feed you and your family, and to nourish your servant girls. Proverbs 28 and 29 are called the royal proverbs because they deal with leadership. They deal with the health of the nation. And you can read through those two chapters and you'll find there's, well, I don't know how this fits in here. There are some of those verses, but in many of the cases, like chapter 28 and verse 28, when the wicked rise to power, people go into hiding. When the wicked perish, the righteous thrive. Have you ever seen a man or woman elected to public office and you went, oh no? I have too. I've got a brother that doesn't vote because he thinks that he's exercising a spiritual option and he thinks it doesn't do any good. And he kind of gets after me for voting, and he says, why did you even vote? I said, because I didn't want that person to be elected. But this person got elected. Yeah, but they're not that person, okay? So I realize you can only do that for so long because it still keeps getting lower and lower. But I understand the spirit of this verse. When the wicked go into power, the people go, oh no, what are we going to do? See, this is a leadership section, Proverbs 28 and 29. Now, Proverbs 27, verses 23 through 27 is kind of the introduction to the leadership chapters. And it starts off with, be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. Now, that's what a farmer or a shepherd or a cattleman would do, right? That's what a rancher would do, okay? I can't help when I come to Montana, you go into your convenience stores. I took my wife to the airport this morning, stopped to get gas, went inside to buy an extra quart of oil, make sure I had some just for security. I walk in there and the first thing that hits me is a rack of books with Montana and Western history. And they shouldn't do that. Because some of us cannot help but buy one. I bought a $5 bottle of oil and a $17 history book of the West. Well, there's like 2 or 3 stories from all the states of the West, including Kansas and Montana. I did not even look at any more books because I knew I didn't need to buy 3 or 4 of them. But I only got to glimpse one of them this morning. But was it back in 1860? When I got back, I only had a few minutes, but I did look at one chapter for Montana. It was 1867 or 68. Was that when they had the bad winter? It went 55 degrees below zero? 87. Something like 60% of the state's cattle herd died. Who here's from Great Falls? There were like 5,000 cattle wandering into Great Falls, crying for food and dying on people's doorsteps. Horrible winter, wasn't it? Huge cattle ranchers went broke. They lost all their cattle. Okay, I'm impressed that somebody took inventory and they were able to calculate 60%. That is a man, whoever came up with that, or woman, that knew the importance of knowing your flocks, your crops, your animals, all the facets of your job. If you're going to be a farmer, you have to know it if you're going to survive. And that person knew. Probably went around and took estimates from ranchers. How many did you lose? How many did you lose? And put it together. I think it was 60% in the state was lost. That's a lot of cattle. Whoever wrote this verse in Proverbs knew those kind of stories. And they knew you've got to know the condition of your herd. Are they getting enough grass? Is there enough water? Is there a drought? If this water source is running low, where can you go to find some more water? Because if you don't keep up with the condition of your herds, what happens? You won't have milk and meat from the cow. You won't have wool from the sheep. You won't have, you won't have carrots from the garden. Whatever it is you're farming, it's not going to be there. This section on leadership begins with know your farm. So what do you think this is really about? It's not really about a farm, is it? It's about your people. And here's another reason why we know this. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. What the king, if Solomon wrote this, what the king is telling other kings is, just because you have a position does not mean you're going to be in that position forever. People can rebel against a king. They can assassinate a king. God can choose for you no longer to be a king. A crown will not endure or is not secure for all generations. Your grandfather may have been a great king. Your father may have been a great king. If you're not a great king, the people can drive you out. They can kill you. You can lose your kingdom. So the king, who often expects the people owe me and they ought to serve me and they need to pay taxes to me so I can live better, Solomon says, no, that's the wrong view of what it is to be a king. The people don't owe you. You owe the people. You need to know who the people are. You need to know how the people are doing. You need to know how the people think. That's why in our own country in 1770 or the 1780s, whatever it was, when they came up with the Constitution, they had it in there that the leaders had to be more answerable to the people. Taxes could only be administered from the state and local level, not from the federal level, because they didn't want someone in Washington dictating what somebody way over in Western Tennessee at that time had to pay. Now it's way over in California. How do those people in Washington know anything about those people in California and what they're able to pay, what they should pay, etc.? They said they can't know. So do not let them have power over those people. Keep it at the state level. Let the state people who are closer to you have power over those kind of decisions. Where does that kind of wisdom come from? Well, it doesn't come from our modern era, does it? Because we don't practice that anymore at political circles. But that kind of wisdom comes from Scripture. It's not that the people owe the king owes the people. To know them well enough to provide an environment for their people to prosper. Because if the people don't prosper, the king won't either. If the people suffer because they can't raise enough food, they can't make enough money to live, and they crash, eventually the whole kingdom will crash too. And it's the wise king who knows what the temperature is, where the green grass is, and where the water is, so his people live well. And guess what? If you're an elder in a local church, or if you're a deacon, and the wives of the elders and the deacons, if you're a Sunday school teacher, if you're a youth leader, if you're a preacher, guess what your herd is? It's those 17 or 18 people that come into your class, or the 4 or the 5, or the 30 or 40 in the church as a whole. That's your flock. And you know their condition. Which ones have been in the hospital? Which ones have just lost a parent? Which ones have a major disappointment from work? And they're just wondering if they're of any value to themselves or their family anymore because they can't provide, and they're thinking of just opting out. Do you know who those people are? Do you have any way of making contact with them? That's this verse right here. Know the conditions of your flocks. And that's how we lead our people. So number two, we listen to people because we listen to gauge the spiritual health of our people. Number three, we listen because it is through listening that we connect and we build community. To connect through listening, I would suggest, and we've already read a number of verses on listening, but to build community through listening, to connect through listening, I would suggest, number one, start with 1 or 2 people. Start with 1 or 2 people that you're going to determine, I'm going to listen to them. And you don't have to go up to them. If you're a deacon at your church and you realize that as a deacon, you're a spiritual leader too. You're not just in charge of making sure the facilities work. And in Acts chapter 6, those who were chosen, I know they were not called deacons, but they were given jobs like deacons, but they had to be spiritual people, right? As a spiritual people, you're connected to who? To God and to the water faucet of church? No. You're connected to God and the people at church. And because you're spiritual, now we can entrust you with certain of these responsibilities. But you're first a spiritual person. That's why you're putting in charge of, say, the buildings and grounds. But the spiritual side of you realizes, I'm more than just the caregiver of our building and grounds. I'm also the caregiver of people. So I'm going to connect with someone. And you don't just go up to them and say, hey, we've been coming to the same church for 11 years, but I'm sorry, I forgot, what's your name? Bodie, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Bodie. Man, hey, I'm one of your deacons. Did you know that? You didn't know that? Yeah, I was elected 8 years ago. Where were you? You were here. You didn't know I was one of you? Hey, Bodie, listen, I'm going to change the way I do leadership now. I'm going to start listening to you, Bill. You tell me whatever you want. I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to start, you got anything to tell me, you just tell me, and buddy, we're going to connect. Next week, no, I'm out of town next week, but I'll tell you, the week after that, I'm going to be, you talk to me, okay? So you come up 2 weeks from now and say, hey, Brother Warren, do you remember me? Man, I sure do, Bennett. How are you doing? It has been, wasn't it Bennett? No, it was Brian. Bill, what's it? Brody. I'll get it eventually. No, that's not what I mean by, okay, I'm going to start listening. No, you don't even have to announce it. Just see the guy and say, hey, I never did get to ask you, how your job interview went. I'll tell you what, you're running out with your family right now, church is over. Why don't we get together for coffee this week and just tell me about it? You know what you've just done? You've probably done something for that man that nobody else has done with him for 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years. It just blows me away because I like being alone a lot of times, and a lot of men do, but we don't want to be alone all the time. There's a man in our community that is very well known. He's a businessman. A couple of years ago, we started deer hunting together just because we hunted the same area. So I said, well, why don't we go together? And he said, sure, we can take my truck. I said, no, I invited you. We can take my truck. He said, no, we'll take my truck. I said, okay, let me buy some gas. No, we don't need to buy any gas. And I said, well, let's stop. We'll get some coffee. And he says, okay, I don't want to say who it is because the folks from Ulysses are going to know who it is. But he owns a restaurant. Okay? He says, no, I'm going to take care of this. And we stop at his restaurant and get some food and coffee to go out. I said, this is not why I invited you to go hunting with me, for you to provide the truck and the gas and the food. I like it, but this is not why I invited you to come. Well, then at the end of the season, he gives me a Christmas gift of a hunting knife engraved with my name on it. I said, why did you do this? He says, do you know how many people asked me to go hunt with them? None. I said, but you know all kinds of people here. And everybody knows you. He says, I know them, they know me, they're busy, I'm busy. I don't drink coffee with anybody. So we kept saying, we're going to go shooting, because he likes to hunt, I like to hunt. I don't remember when this was. Last year I got another gun. Well, not just a gun. Last year, after I got a certain gun, I said, let's go shoot this. He says, I want to shoot that. And he says, you can shoot my gun. I said, yes. So he took several, I took several. He had one I wanted to shoot. I had one he wanted to shoot. We went to a sand pit and we shot. And we had a great time. Only about 45 minutes or an hour, but it was a great time. A couple of months later, just recently, I called him up and I said, Bill, I've just been thinking that we haven't shot in a while. We ought to do that again, but I can't right now today, but I'm just throwing this out to you. Let's do it again. Well, all he heard was go shooting again on the phone. So he calls me back and says, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. I said, Bill, I said, I can't do it this morning. I can go out to eat lunch with you. Let's do that. But I can't go shooting because I'm going to have to change. We're going to go out. I'm going to get sweaty. I've got a meeting after lunch. I can't do that. But I can grab lunch with you. You want to do something? He says, I'll be right by you. He picks me up and we go out and eat lunch. And you know what he says is, thanks for asking me out for lunch. Because nobody does that. Now see, I am in church regularly. He's not. So I eat lunch with people and I see people. So I just take it for granted that everybody has somebody that will say to them, let's go grab lunch. But I'll bet half or more of the people in your community do not have someone on a regular basis that says, let's go have some coffee. It's unbelievable, but I'll bet they don't. And the more prominent they are, and the more well-known they are in the community, I dare say the more lonely they are. Because everybody thinks. Everybody knows them, therefore they are swamped with time. People taking up their time and taking them out to eat, and the fact is probably nobody does. So, community building through listening, all you've got to do is say, let's go get a cup of coffee, and I guarantee you're going to have a new friend. Even if you call Brody Bill, he's still going to appreciate that you pay for the coffee, right?
You're not saying his name correctly.
What is it?
Bodie. No R.
Bodie. You see how it works? See? Do you still feel honored? He didn't answer. I'm going to take that as a yes. Yes. Hey, there's my point. So Bodie without the R. All right. And that's on video. I'll play this someday and I'll remember that. Very good. But I guarantee, especially if you invite them out for a steak dinner, you can get the name wrong and they're still going to appreciate it. But name does help. So thank you. Bodie. Listen with eager interest. Hear what is shared without retreating, because you're entering the battle to find God, not solve the problems in people's lives. Now that has helped me to realize that too. When you start to listen to build community, at first you may start out talking about things you have in common, like hunting, like fishing, like going to college, dating, whatever it is that you guys share in common that you find out and you talk about. Okay, that's getting you kicked off. But eventually, as they start to develop trust, they may say, well, I've got this going on in my life. I've got that going on in my life. And it's freeing to know that you don't have to have the answers for all of that. The power can be simply in the listening, that they've got somebody to actually hear what they're saying. Have you ever tried to fix something for somebody that they didn't want fixed? How many husbands especially are going to raise their hands to that? How many husbands have had their wives tell them, I'm not asking you to fix this. I'm just telling you because I want you to know and to hear. Yeah. How many husbands have had to have your wives tell you, I don't want you to go punch them. I just want you to listen. Because we get mad at what they're saying, right? But what they're trying to do is just share with us, get us to listen, and we don't have to fix. And that's true of everybody we listen to. There's sometimes we tell somebody a problem, we know they can't fix it, but we don't expect them to. But we do appreciate them for listening. And that builds community. So start with one or two people, realizing you're entering into their lives to struggle with them to experience Christ. You listen with eager interest. You hear what is shared without retreating. You enter with the thought of companionship, not heroic or expert rescue. A very dangerous person in the local church is the person who wants to rescue all the hurting people. If you enter into all these relationships because you are the more mature one and you're going to rescue all these people, guess what you're going to do? Number one, you're going to burn yourself out. Number two, there's none of us that knows enough or is big enough to take on all the problems of everybody else and provide rescue. And what we're going to do is, if we do try to rescue everyone, is if we think we have the solution to their problems, we're going to expect them to follow our advice. And when they don't follow our advice that we wisely give them because we know how to fix their problems, we get angry at them, and we wind up pushing the heads of the people we're trying to rescue deeper in the water because we're so mad at them and we want to show them just how much they need us. Rescuing is very, very dangerous business. Even trained counselors and social workers and others in those helping fields know that having that degree and that training does not prepare you to be the great rescuer. There's only one great rescuer, and that's Jesus. And what does he even say? He says what? If we seek him, yearn for him, as one yearns for food or water, then we will find him. Right? There's got to be that interest on our part. There's any number of people that are just sitting there waiting to be rescued without having to invest anything of their life in it. And Jesus himself says, I don't save that way. Blessed is the one who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, who hungers and thirsts for the one who can rescue them. Not the person who just sits there and says, I have all kinds of problems. Will somebody in this church please rescue me? There's somebody there willing to do it. But a lot of times that comes out of their own darkness, their own selfishness and need to be recognized, their own need to be in control. And that doesn't do that person or themselves any good. So when we go into a listening relationship, it is with the thought of companionship, not heroic or expert rescue. And finally, number 4, we listen to avoid conflict, or we listen so we can handle conflict. Handle. Here's a quote from Grant. I mentioned his project before of getting people together for Lectio Divina to try to break this impasse of older and more middle-aged men to work together. Leaders need to listen when frustration is present. Grant, writing, bringing together the two sides was powerful. Once they understood one another's position, they had a much greater chance of developing a satisfying solution. Grant's project, remember, addressed the problem of older members frustrated with young members not serving and leading. The problems continue to develop, okay, or continue to need to be attended to. But at least there was now, with the scripture, Ephesians 4, 1 through 16, serving as the basis, there was at least the opportunity now for the men to listen to each other, to realize what the problems were, and why some had handled the situations the way they did in the past, and to give the younger men a chance to say, I see why you did that. We might do it differently, but we see why. And the church is still alive, is still working, and Grant is still a minister there. That's all because of listening. They avoided a split. They handled conflict through listening, not just lecturing. That is critically important. A quote from Ron Crandall in a book, Turn Around and Beyond. This is how to turn a church around. Listening is not an abandonment of leadership responsibilities. That's important for leadership to realize. We are used to speaking and being heard. What we don't recognize is when people have quit listening. If we are speaking without being aware of where the flock is, if we are speaking without an awareness of how our herd is doing, that 66 or 60% has died because of the cold, or there's not enough grass, there's not enough water. If we are speaking but we don't know the condition of our flocks, they could very well quit listening, and we won't know it. And we wonder why we make decisions and the people don't comply. We wonder why we decide this and the people don't jump up and down in the aisle saying, yay, this is what we've been waiting for. Listening does not mean we've abdicated our role as leaders. Listening is not an abandonment of leadership responsibilities, but a way to discern with greater confidence the leading of the Spirit, as well as a way to build trust from the members and enhance mutual investment in a shared future. All of these benefits are invaluable in establishing a renewed culture of faith, hope, and love when the leaders listen to the people. You think of our political environment. How many of you would genuinely like to have leaders who stopped and asked, what's it like to try to raise a family, buy a house, get insurance, and provide retirement on $50,000 a year? Would that make an impression on us if they really stopped long enough to just ask us? Is that easy to do? And do you know why some of them don't understand that? Because some of them are already making $150,000, $250,000, $350,000, $500,000, $1 million a year when they get elected. Some of the senatorial candidates spend tens of millions of dollars, sometimes of their own money, on their campaigns. How can somebody that can afford to spend $20 million on a senatorial campaign of his own money understand what it's like trying to raise a family on $50,000 a year? They simply cannot understand unless they come into your house, sit at your table, drink a coffee out of your chipped coffee mug, and drink the half and half that is slightly soured because you can't afford to throw it out and get another bottle just yet, and ask you, what's it like to live in your world on your income? If a leader did that from Washington, maybe we would start to see changed policies that really make a difference. And what Scripture's trying to say is, if we do that in our local churches, it might make a real difference too. And if we do that in our homes, it might make a real difference too. When our children are younger, I pointed this out the other day, we need to tell them, you will do this because mom and dad say so. But at some point, they need to understand why mom and dad say so. Because when they're 11, 12, 13, they're now in situations away from our home where they can do the thing we said not to do, and we won't know about it unless they get hurt. They can do it and get away with it. Now what we have to do when they get older is give them reason to not do it. Beyond just, we said so. Because it could ruin your reputation, because it could get you hurt, because it doesn't feed the kind of character that we're trying to develop in you, because it doesn't reflect well, it doesn't reflect well on a Christian young lady or a Christian young man, because it's not going to provide the kind of influence that your life needs to have over other people in a positive way. Now the person's free to say, I see why mom and dad don't want me to shoplift. They don't want me to use that language. They don't want me to hang around with that kind of person. Now they have the chance to exercise the choice to increase their level of character and their character strength, or to turn from you in rebellion. But at least we now give them the chance to understand the power of choice. And that's come about because of listening. We're teaching. Then as they get older, we explain a little more. At some point, mom and dad say so is not enough. Because they turn 18, and what do they do then? Mom and dad's voice can still be powerful. But what's even more powerful is when that voice is in their heart, and now their own voice echoes what we've taught them all these years. That's what Proverbs wants to do. Proverbs wants to produce in our children what God over time has produced in our lives through our parents, through wiser people at church that have taught us, through Bible study, through our own experiences. We have now encapsulated this in lessons we've given to our children, and we hope when they drive off and head off to college and they see us in the rearview mirror and we're waving, we hope they're thinking, okay, I am on my own road now. I am choosing my own path, but the voice of mom and dad are always going to be there. Not just because we say so, but because they've demonstrated it, they've shown it, they've shaped it in us. And now it's our decision as well. That's what God wants to do with wisdom. And that's why listening is so powerful in our home, in our churches, because it develops our character. It helps us gauge the spiritual development of not just ourselves, but of the people we lead. It helps us connect with others and form community, and that can build our family, and that can build our churches. And listening can help us avoid and handle conflict in a profitable way. That's why it's important for listeners or for leaders to listen. Any questions?
One thing on listening, you said that you don't always have to have the answer. Sometimes, and I've done this myself, in the act of someone listening to me, and I've seen it other places, you listen, and the person that's talking solves their problem while they're talking because you're listening. And so that can be very powerful.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. That's a very good. Have you ever practiced a sermon or a Bible class in advance of giving it? You know, you've got it written, but you practice it in private, and as you're saying it, you realize this will work or this won't work. You're airing it out. We do that when we're speaking to somebody too, don't we? About a problem. Sometimes just airing it out reveals what the real answer is. if I'm hearing what you're saying right. And that's why it's important to have friends, because as we think about and discuss important issues of politics, of religion, of our faith, of ethics, sometimes you just need people we can bounce ideas off of and not be judged for them. We need people who will listen to us in that way. I saw another hand. Yes?
Hugh Hewitt, in talking about visiting those grieving, has a simple saying, show up and shut up.
Wouldn't that have been good if the 3 friends of Job listened to that? They helped until they opened their mouths. He had some good comebacks for them, but yeah, they would have helped a whole lot better if they had just kept quiet. Anybody else? Thanks for adding to this with your thoughts. I'll see you at lunch.